Douglas and Isaac LaFawn. What's going on, guys?
It's Friday.
It is Friday when we're recording the show. I think it's actually Wednesday when we release the new podcast. But anyway, thanks for tuning in today. Today's podcast is pretty interesting. So this is a follow-up to something we sort of touched base on 2 weeks ago. So if you want to, we talked about refinancing. Should you refinance? So if you want to catch that, make sure you go back to our podcast page and catch it. It was 2 shows ago. So you can catch that on wherever you download your favorite podcast. You'll catch us, or you can catch us on YouTube. But today's show, we're talking about, and this is something, Eric, you're passionate about because you brought this up in that episode we were talking about, and that is, should I pay my mortgage off, or should I pay additional principal payments on my mortgage?
Yeah.
And so what we really want to focus on today is really the question of how does paying off your mortgage, or how does paying additional principal payment on your mortgage affect your overall financial plan? That's really how you should view it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a few things that when you're considering that, there's a few things that you should be considering or look into to determine whether you should make additional principal payments, or if you have a lump sum, pay it off. So what we want to do is we want to tackle both of those today. If you have a lump sum, should you take that money and pay off your mortgage, or should you make additional premium payments? And I think there's probably going to be a pretty good debate back and forth because I think we have a little bit opposing views on that. But I think it's good to have different opinions because that's going to give everybody kind of food for thought of, hey, Eric kind of looks at it this way, Isaac kind of looks at it this way, Brian looks at it a little bit different way. So I think it's good that we'll have a pretty good debate on this.
Well, I don't know how totally different we'll be. I think at the end of the day, the answer is going to be really, really boring. It's going to be, it depends, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because I think you made the very valuable point when you first started talking about it needs to be incorporated into your overall financial plan. It's not a standalone asset that lives over here. I mean, you need to incorporate your debt, your assets, and your liabilities, of course, when you're creating an overall financial plan. And this is, for most people, the largest debt or the largest liability that they have is their mortgage that they have against their home. So it's a very, very important factor that we need to take into consideration as we are looking and evaluating an overall plan.
Yeah, and one of the benefits, with our clients is getting served by a group of advisors is that in most meetings there's a couple of us in there. And to your point, Brian, we may not see it through the exact same lens. But that's ultimately how every family makes a decision. What are the pros and cons? What's why is this a positive way to look at that? Why is that one? Because it's never cut and dry.
That's
Oftentimes, you're just going to have to make a good decision, and the best thing you can do is act on whatever you think should happen and not, go in halfway. So I think it ultimately helps family members figure out what suits them best.
And I think one of the most important things that if you listen to our podcast, you're a regular listener, you're always going to hear us say, I don't think our role or any advisor's role is to tell a client what to do, right? I think it's our responsibility to give you the information that you need so that you can make an educated financial decision. And that's really what this is all about. So to your point, it's our responsibility to give the client the data, which we believe comes out of doing a financial plan, because it's one thing to look at how that impacts you today, but you have to look and see how that decision impacts you 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. That's kind of what we're going to tackle today is, look at the immediate impact, but you got to look at it down the road. So our job is to give the client the information that they need in order to say, okay, this is how it affects me today. I know how it affects me 20 years from now. Now I can make an educated decision to either make a lump sum payoff if I have the money, or make the additional premium payments. So let's do this. What I want to do first is let's take the concept of I'm going to set a scenario. So let's say you've got a house worth $250,000 and you owe $100,000 on your mortgage. Okay? So over the course of your life, you have managed to accumulate some assets, and now you have $100,000 in a non-retirement account. Okay, so just money you've accumulated like in a savings account. And I've come to you guys as my advisor, and I've said, hey, I owe $100,000 on my mortgage. I've got $100,000 sitting in a savings account or like in an investment account or something. I want to know, emotionally, I feel like I want to pay off my mortgage, but I'm really coming to you guys for advice. So what should I do? I want to pay it off, but I want to get your all's advice. What do you say?
Well, I wouldn't say anything until I had a few more answers. So I'd want to know how old that person is.
Yep.
And I'd want to know, you said they had about 100K in savings or non-retirement assets. I would want to know how much they have in retirement assets, or other monies that they could draw from in retirement. How much of it they already saved towards retirement?
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing we do talk about, there is a huge opportunity cost if you were to make that type of a lump sum payment to pay down your mortgage. It's fantastic. You're getting rid of a major liability, but you're also missing out on the opportunity to save for retirement. And it's one of those things where you really only have one opportunity to save for retirement. And every day that you delay saving for retirement, you're putting yourself, behind the 8 ball a little bit, so to speak. I mean, you're getting rid of a major liability, but you're also losing the opportunity for potentially, potential gains in the market or potential gains in your retirement assets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at kind of like what Eric said, of where are the other assets at. I'd probably, one of the first things I'd want to address is, what does your tax diversification look like in across your investments?
Yep.
Do you have a lot of deferred assets in 401ks and IRAs? Do you have Roth assets? Is this non-qualified asset based on how you might want to leave money behind? Like how you think about, are you going to do some stuff for your grandkids with college or whatever? What's the utility from a taxation standpoint that account may benefit you versus simply paying off the mortgage or not paying off the mortgage? But, that would be where I would start, is gathering information first.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are 100% right. I would add one piece to that is you got to gather the information. You have to understand where that client is financially, right? Mm-hmm. The second thing that I think it's our responsibility to educate clients on is that, number one, and you guys hear me say this all the time, and if you listen to the show on a regular basis, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over, but every major financial decision a client makes, there's two components to it, and we have to address both of them. Number one is the data side of it, right? What does that data tell you? And you guys know I'm a numbers guy, but it's the data side of it. You got to know how that's going to impact you financially. Exactly what you're talking about is you got to know what all your asset pile looks like, not only today, but you got to know what it looks like when you say, hey, I'm done in the corporate world, or I want to sell my business and, I want to live off my assets. You got to know what that pool looks like, because you have to accumulate enough assets to then support your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that's number one. But then number two is the emotional side of it, which we can't really help with, and that is just how debt makes you feel, right? So when it comes to, I have a lump sum and I'm paying it off, absolutely right. You have to get the global picture of the client, number one. But number two, I think it's our responsibility. Do we have to educate clients on what is the best use of your money, right? So number one, I look at it as exactly what you were talking about, opportunity costs. You've got money that you've got this $100,000, and if you pay down your debt, let's say your debt's, your interest rate's 3%. Yeah, you're saving 3%, and I get that over the course of a loan. But you're also investing in an asset that appreciates at about 1.5% a year, right? So you've got this huge asset, which is typically, in some cases, the largest asset they own outside of an IRA, right? Unless you own a business. But that asset that you just invested in is appreciating at 1.5%. Now, it's really about 4.5% if you add in the interest and all that stuff, right? So we're 4.5%. But if you can take those assets and you can have it invested in the market where, on average, let's say, you're getting, 6-7% or so, or however, whatever risk profile you're in, that's the offset, right? Is, where is my $100,000 best suited for me? Is it in an asset that appreciates at 1% a year or 1.5% a year, or is it better off in an investment account making whatever average annualized rate of return based on your risk profile? So with that being said, I really think it's our responsibility to show the client a side-by-side of, if you continue to pay your mortgage, A, this is what the long-term outlook looks like.
Yeah.
And B, if you pay it off, you take the $100,000 out of your investment account or whatever, and you apply it to your mortgage, and then let them look at the difference. Because I will tell you, in almost every case that I've ever worked, and I've been doing this 17 years, when we do that for a client, in almost every case, paying down your mortgage is not the best idea, right? Keeping the money invested in the market is the best idea from a data standpoint. However, I will tell you 50% of the time, the emotional part is more important than the data part. And so they wind up making a decision based on the emotion. But the good thing is they got the data, in order to understand the impact to them. And that's what I think our job is.
Well, if ultimately it's the actionable information, and then they feel encouraged based on what they've gotten to make the best decision that they can that's supported by it. And one doesn't have to be perfect over the other. And we've seen sometimes where there's that constant debate, whether they constantly are evaluating for themselves, should I pay extra on my mortgage or should I invest? Yep. And it slows down their investment strategy because they're constantly having that debate. And so ultimately, the more you can encourage people to just feel confident, make a decision, go, they're going to end up in a better place down the road. Even if the analysis says objectively 20 years from now, there's a different number at the end of the road.
So right? You bring up an interesting point. Don't you feel like, or don't you guys feel like that especially when you bring on a new client and you hear them talk about how'd you make financial decisions in the past, don't you feel like that when they didn't have one side, the data side of it, they constantly question whether they made the right decision? It lingers for a while. But I feel like when we show them the data side and then they pick the emotional side of an equation, that they're totally fine with it, right? They go, yeah, I know I made the right decision because I know I had both sides of the equation.
It's an educated decision, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to the emotional aspect, as you just said, versus, valuing, removing that amount of risk in your, overall plan, removing a fixed income or a fixed expense, I should say. But, you're basically trading that off for leverage and liquidity. Because if you do pay off a mortgage or pay off within a lump sum, pay off a big expense, you're losing a lot of liquidity there. And to your earlier point, we were talking about if you had in this scenario about $100,000 in an account, that's 100% liquid versus any other retirement assets that are going to be fully taxable, to your earlier point as well, managing the tax consequence. I mean, all these different things we need to consider because you're giving up a lot of leverage and you're giving up a lot of liquidity by taking a lump sum amount of cash and paying off a major fixed expense.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to sum this up. So if you have a lump sum and you're looking to pay off your mortgage, essentially what we're saying, or what I think we're all saying, is it depends, right? But
say that a lot.
Yeah, it does. But again, when it comes to a lump sum and you're evaluating it, I truly believe that you need both sides of the information. You need the data side to understand how it's going to affect you, not only today when you pay it off, but how it affects you 15, 20 years down the road. And you bring up an interesting point that I want to bring up towards the end. So if you're listening to it and you want to hear this wonderful thought, I don't know how wonderful it is, but clients seem to appreciate it. But you'll have to wait a couple more minutes to hear it. But I think we know you have to evaluate the emotional side, and we know sometimes the emotional side can outweigh the data side, but at least you have both sides of the equation. And so there is that opportunity cost that you need to evaluate, and you can only do that really if you do a proper financial plan is kind of the sum we've got on that. Okay, let's move on to this is the one that, and by the way, having a lump sum and paying your mortgage off, typically we see that when somebody says, hey, I got, I'm down to like 30 grand or 40 grand and I've got it sitting over here, and you're like, yeah, you accumulate plenty of assets throughout your life, just pay your mortgage off. That's kind of what we see. But what we see more often than not is I'm in the middle of my accumulation phase of life, and I want to make, I've got a 30-year mortgage, and being in the mortgage business, you mentioned this during the refi.
A long time ago,
yeah.
But yeah.
But you mentioned this during the refi show is, hey, if you have a 30-year mortgage and you want to bring that down to a 15-year mortgage or a 17-year, make an extra payment a year or make a few dollars extra payment per month that'll accumulate to an extra payment. Mm-hmm. You can bring your mortgage down to a 17, 18-year amortization. On the amortization schedule, bring it down a few years. So with that being said, how do you guys approach conversations with clients when they say, hey, I've got a few extra dollars a month, or a new client comes in and you doing a financial plan and you see that they are making additional principal payments a year? What are some of the common conversations that you have with clients about that specific thing?
Well, I like to look at the rest of their debt. So if the rest of their debt is under control or paid off, and we're really only looking at talking about the mortgage, I think if the rest of their debt is paid off and they have a few bucks to throw at their mortgage every month, I highly recommend that. Assuming, of course, you're also already contributing to your retirement plans at a, let's say 12 to 15% clip all in. And you're doing the other things. You're putting the right amount of money in an emergency savings fund and that sort of thing. But if you can take a few extra bucks, a few $100 a month, and pay down your mortgage a little bit early, I think that's a fantastic thing to do. And I'm a big proponent of not necessarily refinancing to get the lower term. I'm a big proponent of paying off your mortgage by paying a few extra bucks to it each month, because once again, it's providing that flexibility. If for some reason something were to happen to your income and the payment on a 30-year mortgage is going to be far more desirable than the payment on a 20-year mortgage, at least you have the flexibility to go back down to paying that 30-year rate versus a 20-year rate.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we always try to nail down with somebody that typically is in the space where, they're in mid-30s, mid-40s, somewhere in that stretch where these kind of decisions start coming up.
Yep.
And we always look at their margin. So we try to say, budget's one thing. Very few people have a very good budget put together. So we typically look at one tax return, the last two tax returns, look at what was contributed, and you can actually and then look at their savings account, the balance at the end of the beginning, and you can see what they actually saved, and then you know what they actually spent. If you know their net income and you know what they actually saved, then you can determine what their actual cost of living is, which is what the budget is. And so then I think when you can set up someone's margin, it adds clarity to these kind of decisions. Right? Maybe they do need to clean up a credit card. Maybe they need to clean up a line of credit first, prioritize those. Maybe they have some college savings that they've said they wanted to do, but they've never put that in light of the extra payments on the mortgage. So if you can identify kind of what their extra money is every month, that helps them make good decisions. And the other thing we haven't talked about yet is just kind of how do you balance enjoying your life and your lifestyle along with some of these goals, right? What we don't want to see is young, vibrant families not taking vacations because they're agonizing over paying off a mortgage 3 years sooner or something like that. And so you always need to mix in lifestyle in that, because if you can forecast that they're going to hit all their goals, pay off their house, hit retirement when they're 55 years old, takes a lot of pressure off, this crazy urgency that maybe they just don't sleep well about some things. And so I think the more you can put it in perspective for them and encourage them, the easier that decision becomes.
Well, there is definite value in, maybe taking your wife on a nice anniversary date or something like that. If you
versus paying down a mortgage. Here, honey, happy anniversary! I'm making an extra mortgage payment.
Yeah, well, but those are the things.
They say they like that, but they wouldn't accept it.
No,
it would not be a good gift.
No. But those are things you do want to weigh. I mean, that's a fantastic point of weighing the value of life and life experiences versus getting something paid off just 1 or 2 years earlier.
Yeah. So one point I want to add. So I totally agree with both of you. I mean, we certainly evaluate when a client comes in and they have that conversation. But we're going to keep harping back on this, and I'll tell you, just doing a good financial plan allows you to make educated financial decisions, right? And yeah, we see a lot of folks that come in here that don't do a budget, that don't know what they spend every month. But I think it's more. It's beyond more than just knowing what you spend every month. And what you have to know is, absolutely, you got to know what you spend every month, right? You don't have to detail it down to how much, $5 here, $5 there. That's not it. But you got to have a generalization of what you spend. But more importantly, I believe, is if you're in your 30s or 40s or even in your 50s, you have to understand, and this is one point that there's a guy on the radio that's a lot more popular than we are with a very similar name to me, and there's no relation, unfortunately. But I don't always agree 100% with what the teachings are, but there are a few basic core principles that I believe absolutely exist, and this is one of them, is you have to pay yourself first, right? So when you get paid, you have to pay yourself first. And what we mean is you have to save money in a 401k, 403b, and an after-tax account. You have to save money. Right, and that's kind of what we refer to, or what he refers to as paying yourself, and I wholeheartedly believe it. And I actually use that phrase. I hope it's not copyrighted, but I by the way, Mr. So-and-so, I steal that line from you. But point being, when you do a good financial plan and you can show a client that they should be saving X amount of dollars a month out of whether it's 15%, 30%, whatever the number is, as long as you're saving enough every month. Because that savings pool has to accumulate to a certain number, whatever that is, so that when you want to retire, those assets are there to provide the lifestyle that you want from the day you retire until the day you die, right? So you have to be able to do that. Above and beyond that, you can spend and do whatever whatever you want with it, right? Clip that out. But you can
Definitely staying.
Yeah. But you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna give you a perfect example. So we had a new client that came in, I'm gonna say it's probably 9 months ago, and they were aggressively paying off their mortgage. She's 52, 53, and he's around the same age. And so we did a financial plan for them. And yes, they had a pretty big house. They were paying down their mortgage aggressively. And we showed them that they weren't accumulating assets that were going to have enough. They weren't accumulating assets to the degree to where they needed to in order to be able to retire when they wanted to, because they both wanted to retire early. And so we showed them that as long as in their financial plan, we had them saving more. Okay, so they were saving more along the way, but we showed them that. One other issue they had is they were not taking vacations. That was one of their big issue. They were taking smaller ones, but they were like, we were wanting to travel and blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. So we showed them as long as you're saving X, you still have excess cash flow. You can then apply a little bit to your mortgage if you want, but you need to save money to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Right. And they still paid their mortgage off. And that was the way they had it scheduled. It was a year after they retired, but they have cash flow in order to support that for a year. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't an issue. But during the conversation, we literally showed them year-over-year cash flow. Hey, this is what it all looks like, right? And we told them, you need to take, if this is a passion of yours to travel, you need to take those vacations. And we showed them, I budgeted in X amount of dollars per year for you to take vacation. And literally, she started crying in the middle of the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's cool.
She'd probably been stressing about that for a super long time.
Well, yeah, and it's because they didn't sit down and do the budget and understand that as long as they paid themselves first, they were going to accumulate the assets they needed to support their lifestyle. And anything above and beyond that, you can do whatever you want to with it, right? You can pay down your mortgage like you were saying, or you can do whatever you want to do. But it's not like you have to save every dollar and stress over it.
Maintain some flexibility, yeah. Because some folks get so singularly focused on that one goal of paying off their mortgage early that they are taking all of their excess cash flow each month and applying it to that goal, and they are limiting their life experiences. To your point, maybe not doing the nice anniversary dinners, maybe not taking as many trips as they probably should. The most valuable thing that you have, especially early on when you're beginning, investing, whether it's retirement or savings or anything, the most valuable thing that you have on your side when you're investing is time. And for every year that you are throwing away money, and I don't want to say throwing away, that's the wrong term, but you're putting money towards paying off a fixed expense, that's 1 year that's not invested, that you are losing the opportunity for additional accumulation within your portfolio. And if you multiply that over, a period of 5 to 10 years, that can have a really, detrimental effect on the amount of your retirement assets as you go to pull that trigger and quit your job and leap into retirement.
Yeah, like a lot of people, they would say, what's one of the big things you're looking for in life? A lot of them will say financial freedom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, but that financial freedom is like after I do this or when I hit that landmark. It's like all these arbitrary things. And ultimately, if they can see where the strategy goes, if they follow strategy, that's why that lady probably broke down. Is like, oh my gosh, like I can experience financial freedom today.
Right.
I don't have to carry this weight until I get to this destination. I can have confidence that if I just keep doing what I'm doing or adjust a couple things, that I can put my head on the pillow and stop stressing about all this and feel excited when I go on that nice vacation.
Yeah.
So I don't have to feel like it's costing me something to go have fun and enjoy myself and, treat yourself or
right. Or whatever it is you want to do, right?
Yeah, you just don't want to be a slave to your debt.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is what it is. I mean, we're blessed as Americans, I think, to have access to things, to be able to enjoy nice things.
Yep.
And it hasn't always been that way. And so to not appreciate that access to some of those things can sometimes be a detriment to families.
Yeah. So here's sort of my last point, and but I want to get your all thought on it. I think sometimes when we talk about paying off debt or paying off your mortgage, one of the aspects of that has a long-term effect that I want to make sure clients understand. I know you guys have this conversation too, so I want to get your all thoughts for the listeners, and that's when we talk about either paying off your debt in a lump sum or if we're talking about making additional premium payments to get your mortgage paid off, we're saying make sure you understand not only the impact today. That's pretty easy to do. Yeah, it's another $100 out of my net check that I'm having to apply to my mortgage, or I've got this $100,000 and I want to apply it. That's one thing. But you have to look at the longer term effect. And the one thing I think that doesn't really resonate until you actually show them on paper is when you pay your mortgage off, and it's great, right? You don't make a mortgage payment. There's some emotional relief of having it paid off. But what you have to keep in mind is that you have an asset when you get into retirement. Yes, you don't make a payment on it, but that does nothing for you in retirement.
Yeah.
It doesn't supply you with a retirement income. You can't go to the grocery store and take a chunk of your house and go and buy groceries with it. So there's that fine balance, right? And you have to educate people to say, yes, it's okay to have a paid off mortgage. And typically the largest asset they have outside of their IRA or 401k, however you want to look at it, is your home.
Yeah.
And that home does not provide a retirement income when you, now, some people argue, and I've had that argument, well, you don't make a mortgage payment, so, I get that. But when you get into retirement, most people don't have a mortgage. Now, some people do, but most don't. But again, it doesn't supply you with income to be able to live the lifestyle you want to. So you got to make sure you accumulate the assets in order to provide you the income that allows you to live in that house for nothing. So what is your all's thoughts on that? How do you guys talk through that situation with clients?
Just what you said. I mean, you have to. There's a huge amount of value in being able to remove the largest fixed expense for most people in retirement, because because you're going from living off of your income, which can fluctuate or typically go up, to living off of a very fixed income at that point. And if you're living off of fixed income, if you can remove a big fixed expense, that's of huge value. But to your point, you're losing a lot. Your home doesn't give you any income. I mean, you can live in a huge, fantastic home. You can live in $1 million home. You can live in it mortgage free, and that's fantastic. It's not providing you any income. Now, obviously, it's giving you shelter. It's giving you a place to to live and and eat and have family over and do all those things and maybe help to live the lifestyle that you want to live. But it's not giving you any income. It's not. It's an asset, but it's not an income generating asset. Unless you throw a reverse mortgage or something on there, which that's an entirely different show, although it would probably be a pretty short show, I would imagine. But you're not. It's not an income-producing asset. So we need to make sure that we're doing the right things while you're still working, while we still have that amount of time before you retire, to be able to make sure we're generating enough income for you in retirement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one way I would approach when you think about like a retirement, just an asset like that's such a fixed asset, illiquid, right, is what kind of lifestyle do they want in retirement? Is that home? You kind of have to switch gears a little bit. The needs you had in a home when you were raising a family are much different from when you're no longer in that phase. And so, you might have some families that are going to stay in the same city because their kids are there. And that's very true in Louisville, right? There's a lot of people that their parents were here in Louisville, they're here, their kids are going to be here. A lot of people move back after college or go to college here too. And so you kind of always look at, are you going to change the way that you use a house? And so I always try to open up, deconstruct a little bit about how they have their assets positioned pre-retirement and kind of open up their brain a little bit to how you might reposition assets after retirement to actually utilize. When you think about, $400,000 house or something like that in Louisville, is that it's not providing you the same value in retirement for most people that it did when you were pre-retirement. And so I think thinking about how you might utilize, what would you, if you had no architecture in place, what would you choose to use that money for if you had to leave it alone for the next 25 years? And it's fascinating to see where people come back with that. But I think that's a healthy way to look at it. How should you utilize, if you take a fixed number like that appreciates at a very small amount, how would you use that effectively? And then play that into legacy too. It's interesting, and everybody's different. And ultimately, I think it's part of our job is to deconstruct a little bit of the framework that they have around the way assets can be utilized and be creative sometimes. Not everybody's going to take you up on that, but it can be useful.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when we're talking about either paying your mortgage off in a lump sum or you're making extra mortgage payments, I think at the end of the day, our message is you have to know how not only it impacts you today, but how it impacts you 10, 20, 30 years from now, and how it's going to impact you when you get into retirement and what your cash flow looks like. And all that boils down to is doing a good, solid financial plan. And I'll tell you, doing a financial plan, this is maybe another show we'll do, there's a difference between doing a financial plan, which is a snapshot in time, and doing financial planning, which is what we do, which is an ongoing, ever-evolving situation. We're looking at scenarios, and that is one of the situations where when you do a good financial plan and you have accurate data, you can then look at a scenario of paying your house off. What's it look like if I make extra mortgage payments? And that's how you make an educated decision on whether you should make additional mortgage payments. But you also bring up a good point. Isaac, you said something about, college funding, and I think you mentioned that a minute ago. At least I made a note of it, which leads us to our show that will come up next week. And this is sort of a similar show that we did last week. We talked about how much a car actually costs you. If you didn't catch that show, jump back on our podcast because I had a great time with it. I'm a numbers nerd, especially about things like that. And we taught you that your $38,000 car over a 4-year period is going to cost you about $80,000 to $90,000. You don't look at it like that, but that's what it is. The other thing that we're going to do, or the one thing that we're going to do next week, is we're talking about how much it costs you to send your kids to, basically raise your kids educationally. So we're going to talk about private school versus public school. We're going to talk about some college expense and that sort of thing. So make sure you tune in to next week. And by the way, if you're going to watch us on YouTube, we're going to have the same clothes and sit in the same place because we actually record these back to back. So don't think we do have additional other clothes. Anyway,
life is good.
Life is good.
Multiple shirts.
That's right. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we appreciate your feedback. So if you like the content, make sure you leave messages or make a, what's it called? What am I thinking of? Comment. Leave a comment.
Listen, subscribe, rate, review.
Yeah, rate and review. That's the one I was trying to think of.
That's it, yes.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, listen, we'll see you guys. Well, I'll see these guys here in about 10 minutes. And we'll see you guys next week when we're talking about how much it costs to raise a kid educationally.
Yeah, cool.
See you guys next week.
Thanks. Everybody.
The information given herein is taken from sources at IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, IFP Securities, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal-related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. This report may not be reproduced, distributed, or published by any person for any purpose without IFP's express prior written consent. Securities offered through IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member of FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors, doing business as IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Family Wealth Planning Partners are not affiliated. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as IFP, IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believe to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors.